Hey all, this is Dave, and today's big hairy idea is growing a narrative. So today was kind of a funny writing day in the Mason household. Now normally I write the first draft and then I pass it on to Chana and she goes through and she makes her various edits and then it comes back to me and I incorporate certain things and I leave off other things. But here we are, we're several drafts into the cash machine. We're getting very close to the end. And in doing a read through recently, I felt like this new beginning we have was really strong. And from chapter 4 on, I felt totally engaged. But there was a section of chapter 3 that just wasn't working and I didn't know why. And so Chana and I, we decided to read it out loud. And she read the Amber lines and I read the Dylan lines. We're going back and forth. And the scene seemed well constructed. It was kind of a light, fun dialogue. And there was action. They were making lasagna as they were talking about these various topics. But when I read it, it didn't seem to flow for me. And it felt like the information I was trying to give over was almost a data download. It was very, very heady. And I needed to pay a lot of careful attention in order to follow all the points that Dylan was making, or that I, as the author, was trying to teach the readers about mutual funds and short versus long-term capital gains, all these kind of very heady ideas. And it seemed very slow and stuck, despite the fact that we had this light dialogue in between and we had these actions of making lasagna and such. It didn't seem like a great section. And it was about an hour of working on it or so into it that I finally realized what was wrong. The core story wasn't transforming at all through this dialogue. It's like, I think at our cores, what we're really interested in is growth. And we had a dialogue, and it was a fun dialogue in the midst of all this information being downloaded. But the characters didn't really grow in their relationship to one another. There was no huge breakthroughs. There was no huge emotional connection to the information being taught. And that's what finally hit me was wrong with the chapter. So you know what? Why is there no transformation going on in this chapter? Let's think back. Let's think about where chapter 2 left off. Where were they emotionally? Where do we need them to get to? How can this be a vehicle of taking them from that emotional place to this new emotional place they need to go? So once the information becomes part of a transformation, becomes part of a process, now it becomes engaging. Now it becomes the key to moving from here to here. And it makes it part of the narrative. See, I think some of the books that have tried to teach through novel format that in my mind haven't worked, there's plenty out there that I would think are great, but some of those that haven't worked so well are those where the novel is really weak, but it's just kind of, this serves as a very weak structure in order to hold all the data, all the information that the author wants to get across to the reader. The best ones have a really strong story, and the information is a necessary component of carrying the story along, of the transformation that the characters are going through in each stage of the story. And that's what was lacking in chapter 3. I think we really pulled it off through the vast majority of the cash machine, but not in this section. And then once we identified what was wrong with it, it became suddenly a really easy fix. Okay, what is the emotional struggle they have at the beginning of this section? Where do we need them to go through to get through that? How can this data be the cause of them suddenly getting through that emotional place and to the next emotional place they need to be? And once we identify the problem, it's very, very easy to fix. And it's one of those things that I tend to stop and look at, throughout my life. And if I'm just doing something and I can't connect it to any higher purpose, to any higher growth, to any greater experience, it kind of feels difficult to get engaged with it. But when I understand its purpose, when I understand where it's taking me and how it's moving me from point A to point B, well, suddenly I can really dig in and be engaged, and suddenly even things that seem incredibly dry become meaningful because they're part of that process of transformation.